Before I get started, I also want to thank this church because I'm going to have this on YouTube later and Facebook, and I want to publicly thank this church. This is my church home. A few other folks here, it's their church home too, and I really love this church. It's a great group of people. If you're looking for a church, this is a great place. First Baptist Church of Leavenworth. We do services here on Sunday at beginning at 10:30. We have Sunday school begins at 9:15. Before that, a lot of different Sunday schools. So I'm sure we can find a place that's a good fit for you. And then we got we've got a growing children's program that's recovering from all the COVID craziness. So there's a lot of activities for kids as well. I picked this day for a reason. This particular day. On this day, 49 years ago, the Roe v. Wade decision was rendered in the U.S. Supreme Court. And since that time, 62 million babies in the United States have been aborted. You know, that's 69 or 62,000 Dr. Martin Luther Kings and Madame Curies and Abraham Lincolns and amazing people who could have done so much to further this American experiment that were never born. We'll never get to know the plan that God had for them. And as you probably know, if you've been around me, talked to me, campaigned with me, a couple of you, you know that I'm passionate about that topic. And we are about to have the most important pro-life vote in Kansas, really, in my opinion, ever, but definitely in living memory. And that's the value in them both amendment. And I want to talk about that because we're like in the less than 6 months realm. So a long time ago in Kansas, this was really an abortion state. This was an abortion mecca. The abortion industry was very strong in this state, and there were a lot of folks coming from out of state to have abortions here in Kansas. And a lot of folks centered initially down the Wichita area, but then it kind of caught fire across the state, campaigned very hard to get pro-life candidates elected to the House. And over decades, they were able to put limits, common sense limits, on the abortion industry. We're talking, things that even a lot of pro-abortion people agree with, right? Or pro-choice people believe. Like, somebody shouldn't be able to drop your 14-year-old off at an abortion clinic without your knowledge to have an abortion. I think a lot of people on both sides of this argument agree that they would like to know that their teenager is pregnant and having an abortion. Things like you can't, we're not going to provide taxpayer funds for people to have abortions. Even people that, a lot of people that believe that abortion should be, freely available and legal and, easy to get, don't understand that other people don't feel the way they do and don't think those people should be compelled to pay for it. Things like, live dismemberment abortion, which is late-term abortions, right up to the moment of conception or moment of birth. A lot of people think, well, sometimes it should be legal, but they don't believe that that's a practice that we in Kansas should endorse. And over the years, 20 plus laws like that, just common sense limits on the abortion industry, have been put in place. In April 2019, the Kansas Supreme Court had been hearing a case on one of those abortion laws. And in their decision, they inexplicably found an inalienable right to an abortion. And the decision says that all limits on abortion, any laws passed about the abortion industry are presumed unconstitutional. They're null and void. The burden is on the state to prove that they're not infringing on this inalienable right. And I say inalienable right because the place where they found the right to an abortion is in the clause in the Kansas Constitution that says that we have a right granted us by God to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's where they found the right to an abortion. So the right to an abortion elevates the right to an abortion to on par with freedom of speech, right to bear arms. It is fundamental and given by God. And so all the laws, all 20 plus of those limits, those reasonable limits that have been put on the abortion industry, are now not being enforced. They're not in effect. Because every time you try to impose one of those laws, try to prosecute somebody for violating one of those laws, it immediately goes to court, and the court, using this decision from the Kansas Supreme Court, has no choice but to find the law unconstitutional and vacate it. So we can't enforce the laws, because if we enforce them, they're going to go away. And this isn't a hypothetical either. The live dismemberment abortion ban has been overturned. Just recently, the law that says that there are basic safety standards that are required in an abortion clinic has been overturned. So there are now no legal limits or requirements for an abortion clinic for basic safety and cleanliness anymore, and no way to inspect. So this is a very this decision has really just upended the Kansas abortion law, Kansas abortion laws, and as a result, because we're now a no holds bar abortion state, the number of abortions in the state is rising. 9% increase last year in the number of abortions, and those are people coming from out of state into Kansas to have abortions. The abortion industry's own research group, who was contracted by the abortion industry to do a study of what will happen if we don't pass some kind of something to restore our abortion laws, says there will be a 1,300% increase in abortions in the state of Kansas. We are going to be the abortion capital of the Midwest and of the Great Plains if we don't do something to restore these laws and our rights through the legislature to put common sense limits on the abortion industry. That's what Value Them Both does. 2020, the legislature tried to pass a resolution called the Value Them Both resolution. All the resolution does is gives you the right to vote on whether we're going to have an amendment to the Constitution that makes it clear that there's not an inalienable right to an abortion in our Constitution. That's all it does. It doesn't ban abortion. It doesn't impose any new restrictions on abortion. It just says that the laws that are in the books now are constitutional or are no longer presumed unconstitutional, and it gives you, through myself and Representative French, who's come in, who represents the south half of Leavenworth and Lansing, and all the other representatives, the right as your representatives to put basic limits on the abortion industry. They tried to pass that in 2020. You have to have a 2/3 majority to even get an amendment onto a ballot for you to vote for. It's a very high bar. I mean, because you don't want every legislature coming in and changing the Constitution. It's supposed to be hard, because that's a big deal. That's our fundamental law in the state. And so they tried. The Senate passed it. The House fell 4 votes short. The 4 Republicans, they had 84 Republicans. They had enough Republicans to pass it, but 4 Republicans voted against it. And then 4 senators who said, or 4 representatives from the other side, the Democrats, who said they were pro-life, including, unfortunately, our Senator, Jeff Pittman, who was a representative at the time, voted against the amendment, and the amendment failed. The resolution for the amendment failed. There was an election. All 4 of those Republicans who voted against the Value in Both amendment were defeated in elections, in primaries, and replaced with pro-life Republicans. And 2 of those Democrat seats flipped to Republicans. So now we have 86 Republicans in the House. So the people of Kansas have already spoken on this issue. Because I don't know about all those other candidates, but I know me and Representative French, we were running on this issue. We were running on the promise that we would pass this resolution. And so the people of Kansas had spoken loud and clear. And so when we came into the legislature this year, or last year, 2021, after 2 weeks, we passed the Value in Both resolution. What this resolution does is it puts on the ballot on August 2nd of this year this constitutional amendment. And you have to vote on whether you want this added to the Constitution. 50% plus 1. If 50% of voters plus 1 person vote for this amendment, it becomes a part of our Kansas Constitution. I'm going to, I've heard a lot of things about this amendment that frankly are just not true. I've heard, the abortion industry is already pouring millions of dollars in the state. And I get grief sometimes for calling it the abortion industry. It's an industry. $1.6 billion a year in the United States is spent for having abortions. The abortion industry is making $1.6 billion a year across the United States, not just in Kansas. $800 million of that is taxpayer money through various forms of federal insurance and subsidies and such in different states for the industries where it's welcomed. So this is an industry, and it's big money. And so the abortion industry knows that if this thing gets defeated, they're going to have a 1,300% increase in abortions in the state. That's a whole bunch of money. And so they're pouring a whole bunch of money, because it takes money to make money. They're pouring a whole bunch of money in the state to defeat this amendment. And they're saying things like it bans abortion, it takes away. I heard some of the Democrats in the House, unfortunately including our current senator, say, well, I can't vote for it because it doesn't protect the exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. That's just ridiculous. It doesn't have any restrictions in it. All it does is uphold the laws that are currently on the books that already have those exceptions in it. So how would you write an exception into something that's not a limit? It doesn't in any way limit abortion. So that's nonsense. But I've also heard some people on both sides of this issue say, well, I don't really want abortion written into the Kansas Constitution. I don't want you putting, or us putting, abortion in the Kansas Constitution. And I would just reply to those people, we aren't putting abortion in the Constitution. The Kansas Supreme Court put abortion in the Kansas Constitution when they read Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness and decided that meant inalienable right to an abortion. What we're doing is what you will do if you vote for this amendment, vote yes for the Value in Both amendment, is make it clear that it's not in the Constitution. Why am I telling you all this? The vote's not for 6 months. The abortion industry is pouring millions of dollars into the state trying to confuse people about this amendment. We are not going to get a fair shake in the media. You can write a letter to the editor in support of the Value in Both amendment, but there's going to be 5 articles written by columnists who are on the payroll about how it's stealing the rights of women, to their reproductive rights, whatever that means. So that's we're not going to win in the media. The only way we're going to win is like this. In our churches, in discussions with our neighbors, one-on-one, telling the truth about what this amendment does. And that's people power, right? That's not electrons, that's not the internet, that's me and whoever I can talk into doing it with me, going door to door with these mailers and talking to our neighbors and telling them the truth about what the amendment is. And if you don't believe it works, I'll tell you it does. This last municipal election, we had 10 conservative candidates and a write-in. 8 of them won, and one of them, our write-in, beat the incumbent. And the reason is because of a lot of people in this room who were out going door to door, knocking on doors, telling their neighbors about the issues and about those folks. So it does work, and it will beat all the craziness on social media and all the craziness on the internet and all the craziness in the media, but we got to work. I'm a person of faith. I believe in our Lord and Savior, just like I think everybody in this room. But we're His body, right? We're His feet, we're His hands, we're His eyes, we're His ears, we're His mouth. And so we've got to go out. We got to go plant the seed. That's what we're called to do. We got to go do that. And so if you're interested in doing that, I'm going to start in March. If you're interested in doing that, talk to me while we're out there, or talk to me after, and I will be happy to tell you how to help. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of the current state of play with COVID-19 and the state's response to COVID-19, because it's a fast-running train. I can't, it's crazy. I make a video and I schedule it for next week, and it's already old. It's already bad info because it's moving so fast. And so I wanted to just give you a quick update while I had the opportunity to tell you what's going on with it. So I did not start my campaign in 2019 to run on coronavirus, and it wasn't even a thing. We didn't even know it was out there. We didn't know that some lab in China was, doctoring bats or however the heck they came up with this thing. I was running on bringing jobs to our state and bringing jobs to our town, and getting our economy going again and saving our downtown. And I'm still fighting for those things. But when this thing hit, I could see how it was going to go. I could see the dominoes lined up and how it was going to go. And the reason, it's not that I'm like prophetic or I know something that you don't know. It's just, I spent 25 years in the Army, right? And whenever something bad happens or something bad's about to happen, the easiest thing is to just go overboard, right? To just, better safe than sorry, right? And then once you've done it, once you've imposed the safety measure, it's very, very hard to claw it back. It just becomes like a permanent thing. And the joke is in the Army, the PT belt, right? That silly reflective belt that we all have to wear. They keep making these uniforms for physical training that have reflective stuff on them, but we still wear that silly belt because somebody 15 years ago thought it'd be a good idea for us to wear those reflective belts so we didn't get run over when we were running, and now you can't take them off. They're like a permanent fixture. It's nuts. They're guys in combat in Iraq and they're wearing safety belts. It's just, it's crazy. I've got a little far afield, but that's what I saw happening, right? The Kansas City had locked down. It shut everything down and closed all the restaurants. And I could see people are scared. And when people are scared, the leaders feel compelled to do something. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if they don't know if it'll work, they have to do something. They have to do something, to show that they're doing something. And so I could see it coming. And so in March 2020, when it was all starting to get bad, the Leavenworth County Commission had a meeting. And I went because I was going to give public comment. I was going to say what I just said to you, which is you're thinking to yourself, better that you can't be too safe, but you can be too safe. You can be so restrictive that in curing the disease, you kill the patient. That in keeping people safe from coronavirus, you make them destitute, you put them out of work, you close their businesses and destroy their livelihoods, and you kill the economy, to respond in a way that we're not even sure is going to affect, this problem we have. Well, they didn't have public comment. They didn't do public comment. They just handed the keys to the county health officer and let him drive the car. And you guys know the rest, right? They locked us down. The mask mandates, all these things that have happened since then, right? So I was way out in front on this issue, and there were a lot of smart people telling me to shut up. There are a lot of people that were thinking about issues like valuing them both and our taxes and all these other things that are important issues too, and they just wanted this seat because it was a Democrat seat and I was a Republican running for it. And they're like, hey, just shut up about coronavirus. You're not in office. You're not taking votes on it. You don't have to say anything about this. Just talk about what a wonderful person you are and your record and your education, and you're going to get elected. And, they're smart people and I respect them. And so I really considered what they said. But then I asked them, and these are, some pretty important people that if I said their names, you'd know who they were. I asked them, why am I running? If I'm not running to lead on issues to help my neighbors and to speak out about what's right and have a platform to be heard and advocate on behalf of the people that I want to represent, why am I running? If I'm just running to sit in a seat and push a button, 100 times a session, I don't want to. I'm going to go do something else. I'm taking a huge pay cut doing this, frankly. So I'll go do something else. If that's all you need me to do, I don't want the job. And so I kept talking, and I talked pretty loud. I went to the big rally on the Capitol steps in 2020 in May, and I was pretty far out on this issue, and it probably cost me some votes because people were scared, and they just wanted the government to protect them. It's just protect us, help us, save us. And so it probably lost me some votes because people were scared. But I think that people have started to come around. I think that a lot more people are looking at what's happened since then, and they're maybe questioning all those things that we were doing a year ago. That's a long way to get to where we're at now and why I feel the way I feel about some of these issues. But in May, at that rally, May 2020, we were demanding on the last day of the legislature that they do something to rein in the governor, because the governor was imposing these edicts, these executive orders, and because of a quirk in the way the law was written, because the law was written for like fires and tornadoes, things that got cleaned up in a week or two, she basically was the executive and the legislative branch. She didn't have any checks and balances. She could do whatever she wanted. And so they passed a law, she vetoed it, and then she called him back into special session, and then they passed the same law again and she signed it, which gave counties the ability to opt out of her executive orders. And it also gave the Legislative Coordinating Committee, which is the committee that is in session when the legislature isn't, it's the leadership of the legislature, gives them some authority to oversee her orders. But it was duct tape and baling wire, right? It was just a patch. But that's really what we lived under until the legislature came back into session and I joined the legislature. When I joined the legislature, we had, that was one of the big things on our plate, was how do we do something permanently to fix the Kansas Emergency Management Act to give you a voice through your legislature in these executive orders and in the response to not just this emergency, but any emergency. And what we came up with were, a series of laws, restricting her ability to just keep doing executive order or doing emergency declarations over and over and over and over and over again, but also codifying the county's ability to opt out. If your school or your city imposes restrictions, you have the right to take that to court it sets a timeline so they can't just slow roll you for 6 months until the restriction elapses. But we put in these mechanisms to create checks and balances between the executive and the legislative branch, because my two fundamental things, whether we're talking about taxes or we're talking about abortion limits or we're talking about COVID-19 response, is that decisions that affect your life should be made by elected officials, and those decisions should be subject to checks and balances so that the different branches of government. I didn't think that up. That's the United States of America. That's what we're founded on. That is our system of government. It goes back to the Enlightenment people, and I could bore the heck out of you. I'm a historian. I could talk for hours about it. But the point is, that is the American system. That is how things work in a constitutional republic. And I am zealous. I spent 25 years in the Army fighting to defend that system. I'm zealous to ensure that it is used, that the system's used and not circumvented. So that Emergency Management Act change was passed into law, and it worked pretty well until a Johnson County judge got a hold of it. Somebody was trying to use the mechanism to sue the school board over a restriction that they had put in place, and the Johnson County judge used that to overturn the act. And for a while there, we didn't have anything, right? And in the legislature, we were all holding our breath because we were out of session, and basically this judge had annulled the entire act, all the changes we've made. The governor, if she wanted to, she could have imposed new, like a new disaster declaration. We could have gone back to March 2020 if she'd wanted to. But thank God she responded to the will of people, which has been turning progressively since March 2020, and she didn't do that. And since then, the Kansas Supreme Court has upheld that law, and it's now back in effect. They said that that Johnson County judge overstepped his authority by overturning that law, which I concur with. I don't always agree with the things the Kansas Supreme Court does, but that's one of the times when I do. So the latest developments were really the vaccine mandates. And I want to take a minute to talk about kind of where I think we're at on vaccine mandates. But this is a moving target. And it may be that something happened today that I didn't see on my way out the door, because that's how fast it's moving. President Joe Biden, after he was elected, he imposed this vaccine mandate regime. I say regime because it's not just one mandate, right? We say vaccine mandate, but it's really vaccine mandates. There's the mandate where OSHA says that if you have more than 100 people that work for you, you have to make them get vaccinated, or they have to get tested every week at their expense. That's one of the mandates. One of the mandates is the federal employee and the military vaccine mandate. There's a mandate on healthcare workers. There's a bunch of mandates out there. I am not anti-vaccine. I know there are people in this room that have strong philosophical or scientific concerns about the vaccine. I think that it's like any other medicine. It has risks and it has risks and it has benefits, right? And as with any medication, in my mind, you got to weigh the risks and the benefits. But I understand that other people have different opinions on that, and I respect your opinions. And I think that you should be able to act on those opinions, just like I or anybody else who has a different opinion can act on their opinions, right? So I'm not anti-vaccine and I'm not anti-mask. What I am is I'm anti-mandate. You should not, you should not be forced to have a medical procedure as a condition for keeping your livelihood and feeding your children. That is not informed consent. That's coercion. And so I am absolutely zealously opposed to mandates. I do understand that, you know, the government has the authority to impose laws, but just like I said, every decision that affects your life should be made by an elected official and subject to the checks and balances that are inherent in our system. When President Joe Biden can amble up to a microphone and with a spoken word impose a law that threatens your livelihood and forces you to do something medically to yourself against your will, that's no longer a constitutional republic. We live in a autocracy when we allow that to stand. And I wasn't the only one that felt that way. A whole bunch of other legislators, including Representative French, felt the same way, that this shouldn't stand. So we had an effort to call ourselves into special session. 19 legislators signed on to that. I was one of those. And there was a huge demonstration. That petition really encouraged the leadership and to hold hearings because it demonstrated how much passion there was about the issue, and a lot of people here showed up. I showed up. A lot of people here showed up. The paper said there were like 200 or 300 people on the South Lawn. There was 800 if there was a person. I had never seen that many people on the lawn of the Capitol. Not even in May 2020 were there that many people on the Capitol lawn. They heard those voices, and for the first time in the history of the state of Kansas, the legislature, by a 2/3 vote or 2/3 petition of both houses of the state legislature, we called ourselves into special session. And what we did was we armed you. We armed you with the weapons to fight against that tyranny. It wasn't gonna, I got a lot of calls and I got a lot of emails, and some of them were people that I agreed with fundamentally, but they were really mad that we had not banned vaccine mandates. I would have loved to do that. And if we had had more time in session, the next bill that I wanted to vote on was let's ban vaccine mandates in Kansas. But it was going to end up in court because the battlefield where this is being decided, and I'll talk a little bit about where we're at in that war, the battlefield where that's being decided is in the courts. It's not in the legislatures because it's a federal mandate. It's going to have to go to federal court. It's going to have to be resolved ultimately probably by the Kansas or by the U.S. What we did in the meantime is we gave you weapons so that you did not have to comply with this tyrannical order that was being imposed on you under threat of your family starving to death and you being put out of your house. What we did was we took the actual federal language from the Equal Opportunity, Equal Employment Opportunity regulations, and we made it explicit in Kansas law in terms of medical exemptions and religious exemptions. A lot of companies were saying, don't even send me a religious exemption because it's going to get disapproved. Frankly, I've heard a lot of military people say that's what's happening to them in Army units, is they're being told, don't even send it because I'm going to disapprove it. But here in Kansas, employers in Kansas are now under this law. And what this law does is if you have a religious exemption, or a religious objection, to this vaccine. And the federal language says that religious exemption means theistic, meaning based on your belief in God, or a God or gods, or non-theistic, meaning philosophical. If you have a theistic or non-theistic, a religious or a philosophical objection to the vaccine, your employer has to presume that you're being sincere. We didn't make up that language. Federal government did. The federal government did, and the Department of Labor did. And if your employer fails to respect the law, there's a mechanism for you to object to that, and there are fines that can be imposed on your employer. And if your employer fires you anyways, we also approved unemployment insurance so that you're getting the unemployment, because you didn't want to leave your job. We've been paying people for quite a while. Some of them probably could have found a job but didn't find a job, and we were paying them for a really long time with those expanded unemployment benefits. I think it's ridiculous that we would then not give unemployment benefits to somebody who wants to work, has been put out of their job because of an unconstitutional mandate. So that's what we did. And I'd like to do more. We're back in session. If somebody passes a law that bans vaccine mandates in Kansas, I am on board. I am voting for that law. So this thing's in the courts, and we've had some good news and we've had some bad news. Recently, the U.S. Supreme Court held that OSHA does not have the power to make employers who employ more than 100 people to get a vaccine against their will. But they did decide that the federal government has the right to put a vaccine requirement on healthcare facilities that take Medicaid or Medicare as a condition to getting Medicaid or Medicare. I don't like that decision. I'm upset about that decision, but I respect our Constitution, and that's the decision. And so right now they've just chosen not to impose an injunction. It might be that at some later point a final decision's made and it is favorable to what I think should happen, but I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know that that's how it's going to fall out. But to me, it's crazy. We're going to fire healthcare workers right now. All I see on TV when I turn it on is how hospitals don't have enough people, and we're going to fire healthcare workers. That's just nuts to me. I don't understand that. But so that I'm just telling you where things are right now. I'm not telling you. I can't predict the future any more than you can. Another hopeful sign is a judge has issued a preliminary injunction on, I think it's a preliminary injunction, but in some way has stayed the federal mandate on federal workers to force them to get the vaccine. And he said something that's really heartening to me, which is when you raise your hand and take an oath to serve the country, you don't lay down your rights at the door, which means that you have to respect somebody's religious beliefs. I mean, we respect prisoners. We actually take away, by the power of the Constitution, take away the rights of inmates, or some of their rights, and their right to liberty. But they still have religious rights. We cannot infringe their ability to practice their religion, even if they're inmates. So why we would infringe the ability of soldiers who are defending those rights, not paying their debt to society, is outrageous to me. So I'm gonna. That's the state of play as I know it now. I'll be happy to answer any more questions that y'all have about that.
Pat, one of the things I want to stress to everyone, the federal government has 3 branches. This is strictly an executive branch mandate. No legislature, no bill has gone up. This is just Biden saying, you're going to do this. You can't do it, as you pointed out. So let me be clear. He is not the federal government. He is one branch. He represents one branch of the federal government that's causing this hate and discontent throughout the nation.
Absolutely.
The federal legislatures, or the legislature, both House and Congress, you'll probably see it comes, if we get this through 22, it's coming to a screeching halt. It's already coming to a screeching halt in England. Boris Johnson stopped it yesterday. Ireland stopped it today. France is stopping it sometime next week. in various stages, so there's no more passports, there's no more mandatory shots, there's no more mask mandate. And by the way, just so you know, I heard this morning that Israel per capita has the highest cases of hospitalization and COVID infection in a quadruple vaxxed population.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
anyway, that's just some of the things. I appreciate the awareness on it. One last thing. I don't know if I've been targeted. Has anybody else gotten these things?
Yes.
All right. Anybody younger than 50 getting these things?
Is that KDHE? Okay. Yeah, I want to talk. Let me talk about this, Scott. I want to talk about this. You got me fired up now. Yeah. Let me talk about it. Thank you. So first of all, I absolutely agree, and I'm going to make some more people mad in this room probably. If the Congress had passed what the president tried to do with the stroke of a pen, and the president had signed it into law, I wouldn't like it. I would hate it a lot, but it would be really hard for me to argue that it's unconstitutional. And that's what the U.S. Supreme Court said. What the U.S. Supreme Court said was that the Congress did not give OSHA the authority to do what they're doing, which implies that if the Congress had passed that law, they would have had the authority. And so, would I have liked it? No. Would I have screamed bloody murder? Yes. And would I have hoped that the Attorney General Derek Schmidt would have sued against it? Yes, I would hope that. I would ask him to do that. But I would not say it was unconstitutional, because that is the constitutional method by which laws are passed that restrict or permit things in our lives. Mostly restrict, because if it's not a law, it's it's presumed to be your right? Because they're a government of limited powers. KDHE. So there was a really good hearing. I think it was either on Wednesday or Thursday in the Senate, where Senator Stephan and Mike Thompson were grilling the KDHE. And if you ain't seen it, man, that is some good YouTube right there. You get on YouTube when you go home and you watch that thing, because I wanted to run down there and hold pom-poms while they were talking. What they were doing was they were going after him on, you're doing all this advertising, but you're not talking to people about risks. If you go to, you're watching, I'm an old man, so I watch old people TV, and, there'll be 20 drug commercials. And, it starts with flowers and birds chirping and people frolicking through the park. And then it has 20 seconds of, this could cause your brain to explode. This could cause your spleen to fall out of your body. They have to tell you, hey, this could benefit you in this way, but there are risks. And why is that not a requirement for us, with tax dollars, advertising these vaccines? Well, I'll tell you why. I know without even having to watch YouTube and the testimony. We have made these pharmaceutical companies immune from prosecution or lawsuits for any complications from their vaccines. So they don't have to tell you, because they can't get sued. And so I think that our government, because they're the ones who exempted them from the consequences of the vaccine that they're getting paid billions of dollars. Pfizer's now a Fortune 10 company, billions of dollars to administer. I think it's incumbent on the government to then tell people there are risks. Again, I am not anti-vaccine. For many people, the small risk from the vaccine is far outweighed by the possible consequences from getting COVID-19. The risks are much higher for people with comorbidities, people over a certain age. And so for many, 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 many people, it makes much more sense to get the vaccine than to not get the vaccine. For many people. But that's a conversation that you should have with your doctor, not a conversation that the president should short circuit with an edict.
I was wondering about the rights of the inmates at Laney Correctional Facility. You said that some rights have been taken from them because of their position that they're in. Does that mean that their medical rights have been taken?
Oh, no.
And their rights to not be locked down and eat and be given moldy food, and the guards discriminating against them and calling them names, and is there any way? They said, I asked about the National Guard, to bring the National Guard in on this.
Yeah.
They told me the National Guard was not qualified for inmates. Well, if they're qualified to lay down their life and fight for us in other countries, I think they're qualified to protect the inmates. And I think they need body cam, the inmates, because personally, family members of mine have been threatened by guards, and they have told them to tell me not to make comments on Facebook about it. And, there's no sense of a human being eating, regardless what they did, they are still human. Eating moldy food, being locked down for 23 and a half hours a day, and treated like animals. People make mistakes.
I want to be clear what I meant. When this is in the Constitution, this isn't Pat Proctor. Your rights cannot be taken away from you without due process of the law, right? You get all your rights in court, and the right that gets taken away from you if you become an inmate, if you're convicted of a crime, is the right to liberty, right? You surrender your liberty. The inmates can't just get up and walk out of their cell and go home. They're paying a debt to society, and they surrender that right. That's what I meant. That doesn't mean that they don't have right. They are human beings, and frankly, they are the responsibility of the state, because we've taken away their liberty, we've taken away their pursuit of happiness, their ability to provide for themselves. We assume responsibility as a society for their welfare until they have paid their debt to society and their voting rights and all their rights are restored, right? That's not Pat Proctor talking, that's the U.S. Constitution and the state law. That's what I meant. But they're people. And the situation that's going on in our corrections facility right now is deplorable, not just for the inmates, for the corrections officers too. It's not safe for anybody in those walls right now. And that's why, it's been several months ago that I called on the governor to mobilize the National Guard to augment the corrections officers force immediately so that there would be more folks, not just to protect the corrections officers from the inmates, but to protect the inmates from the corrections officers and from each other, right? Because when guys are stressed and they feel their lives are in danger, they start doing stupid things, and whether they're an inmate or they're a corrections officer. And so we got to get more people in there. And I've talked about this several times. I want to there's a lot of questions in here, but I've been working on ways to get more corrections officers in the job by keeping the ones that we got, retaining the ones that we've got, by improving the retirement to incentivize them to stay, but also getting them pay raises so that we can attract more people into the corrections facilities, because we need more people on the job to protect us from inmates, to protect inmates from each other, and to protect the corrections officers. But I agree with everything you're saying. It is deplorable, the conditions inside those walls for the inmates and for the corrections officers. I couldn't agree more.
I think the whole thing with the vaccines, and I'm not against vaccines and I'm fully vaccinated, but I think the big thing that the federal government and the state governments have been doing, and this program here, this card mailing and other things. They're not saying, everything up to rather recently, they're starting to admit it, but they were saying that if we get vaccinated, that's gonna stop it.
Yeah.
It's proven that it doesn't, because we can get vaccinated, we can get
Yeah.
this deal, we can get the deal and get it again.
Yeah.
All combinations, vaccination is not,
That's a good, and I,
it's a protection
yeah.
for, that we won't get maybe hit as bad.
yeah. Yeah, and I couldn't agree. You know, and I think that's why the logic is finally breaking down. You know, there was a long time when I felt really lonely, like May 2020. I felt really lonely talking about this issue because I was getting a lot of people at the doorstep saying, "You just need to shut up because we're all going to die, and you know we need these mitigation measures. You can talk to me about liberty later." But now the logic is broken down, right? Why would you mandate, you know, the other day Dr. Fauci said that we should consider vaccine mandates for people to get on airplanes. Why? Yeah, everybody in that plane could still get COVID from a fully vaccinated person.
And that's the thing that the government is lying to us on. They have been all along.
Yeah.
And I don't believe they initially lied necessarily that they didn't think it could happen, but the thing is, it's been proven and they're still lying.
This idea that we're protecting our neighbor and we're somehow selfish if we don't get the vaccine, or if you don't get the vaccine, make logical sense because all it's doing is protecting me. And I know this is going to go on Facebook, and I can already see the comments. Somebody's going to say, "Well, the hospitals are getting flooded because of you despicable, selfish, unvaccinated people." I looked at the numbers yesterday. I haven't looked at them today. Leavenworth County. You might want to take a guess how many people are hospitalized? 4. Do I know how many of them are vaccinated? 2. Equal number. Okay, so maybe in other parts of the country that's true, but it ain't true right here in Leavenworth County. And so why are we forcing people to get a medical procedure against their will?